Okay, so this is a Sea King 1959 boat and motor. My grandparents bought new in 1960 from Montgomery Ward's. It's been a good boat for a lot of years. The motor has done well, had very little service. It was used heavily for 10-12 years probably, and then sat for periods of time between uses up to 10 years or more. And so in the late 80s, early 90s, I know some service work was done to it, new water pump, probably plugs, condenser points, who knows. But other than that, it hasn't received any internal mechanical repairs that I'm aware of. I've revived it probably 15 years ago and used it for a couple summers, and then 3 or 4 years ago revived it again. Just got it going and used it on the river for a couple summers. And the last time the motor got sunk, the boat filled with water. I didn't stay ahead of it, so I pulled the motor, cleaned it up the best I could. It sat for a couple of years. Decided to go ahead and see what I can do with it if it's revivable. It was frozen up, so I lubricated the cylinders, freed up the pistons. I assume it was the piston rusted to the cylinders that was the problem. I pulled these side plates and looked in at the pistons, and the pistons, I don't see marring and such. Like, I don't think there's any cylinder damage, and the rings were free just to push on them on both cylinders. But there are differences between the top cylinder and the bottom cylinder in the lower end. The top cylinder had some rust on it, some rust beads, and carbon on the crank and in the bottom end. The bottom cylinder was really just quite clean. No issues there. Looks really good. Now, I hooked a battery up to it, jumper cables, and ran it, which is not the best connection, but just to turn it over. And the top cylinder, if the plug was in and the bottom cylinder was out, was harder to turn over, quite a bit harder. I assume I was losing some power there just using jumper cables. I just didn't want to put any money into it before I figured out whether it was going to be revivable. So the bottom cylinder, less compression, motor spins over freely with the top spark plug out and the bottom spark plug in. Top cylinder a lot harder. So at first I thought, well, I would think that'd be a difference in compression. I'm not sure at this point. The top cylinder seems to be the one that have an issue, as far as I can tell, but I don't really know, just because of the moisture in the carbon in the bottom end. So it'd be interesting to tear it down and see if I can figure out why there's a big difference there. So that's where we're at. I'm going to try and video the project in general. Pull the power head off, tear the motor down, see what else I can find. The one thing I have noticed here is that right there looks like the top bearing cap for the crank. There's a crack where that bolt is on the bearing cap, and that very well could have been an intake leak if it goes all the way through. So maybe an issue there. Obviously, if the cylinders are in good condition, and the pistons, depending on where the expense goes, cylinders are not available anymore. Pistons, rings, bearings, seals, gaskets are all available. So if there's nothing that can't be dealt with, or it doesn't just cost me $1,000 to rebuild it, I'm going to go ahead and do so and try and bring this motor back to some standard that may give me a lot more years worth of use on it. The lower end never had any issues. It was serviced in the late 80s, early 90s. new water pump seals, things like that. So anyway, I'm gonna pull it off. The boat's a whole another story. It's got a lot of work to be done for it to be restored for sure. There's definitely some fiberglass work and so on and so forth. I'll, you know, if the motor's viable, I'll probably end up doing that. So anyway, look for the next video. Thanks.